Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everyone. On today's episode, I talk with Chris Burris. Chris is a lead trainer with the IFS Institute. Chris and I recently met to talk about critics, and we decided to meet again to talk about core fears, especially during this time of COVID-19 and the pandemic that we are all in the middle of. I want to say in the middle of because I guess we don't really know time-wise, but we're smack in the middle of, I think. Chris says that we can recognize our normal cast of characters, our normal cast of internal characters, and our constellation of our system and the patterns of our parts. It's all very familiar, even though the pandemic is anything but familiar. Our response, our internal response, actually is. And I thought that was pretty comforting to know that what I'm feeling and experiencing and even doing is pretty typical of how my body and my system handles stressors. It's funny, I've not really thought of the pandemic as a stressor because it seems like it's so much more than that. But I liked thinking of it that way. And that idea of what I'm experiencing is actually really familiar to me and is a typical response of my system. So we focus on this question, what are you afraid would happen if you weren't active in this way? And how important that question is. I said it's the second most important question in IFS, which I'm sure I've heard that somewhere, is that what are you afraid would happen? So we would ask our protectors, we would ask our parts, what are you afraid would happen if you weren't active in this way or if you didn't do this? Like, what are you afraid would happen? And we keep asking that question. We keep asking that question of that part over and over and over again until we get to a core fear. So we talk about that. We talk about several different types of core fears throughout the whole podcast. And Chris talks about how our protectors really have designed our lives to not be overwhelmed with feelings and sometimes not even to feel feelings. And so that's one of the things that I think we're really faced with during this pandemic is we're not able to distract ourselves the way that we're used to. And a lot of our protector activities have kept us away from fears and keep us away from anxiety and vulnerability. Chris ends with loving on or befriending. I think my inner Southern girl starts coming out when I talk to Chris. We call it befriending parts, but I started calling it loving on parts who are holding these fears and just feel really alone. So often these exiles, we know we've pushed them away, we've exiled them, and so they really feel really alone. And so just being with them really helps our whole system so that they don't feel so alone and so overwhelmed. And then our protectors don't have to work as hard to keep us from them. Finally, we talk about Will Smith because why not? So if you want to let me know over on Instagram at IFS Tammy or on the One Inside Facebook page, I would love to hear what your favorite Will Smith movie is. And I'd love to hear that. And also, if you know the first most important question in IFS, let me know. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and all of your parts. Enjoy. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. It
Yeah.
changes every day, but last week I had parts that were really angry. I noticed parts that were just like super angry and
Yeah.
just like in a bad mood. And I can almost feel it. Like I'm like this part of me that just wants to be grumpy and in a bad mood.
Yeah, I had a day like that too.
So tell me what you're thinking about and how we can use this time together.
I was thinking about like with the COVID, what I'm noticing is that it's an extra stress for everybody. So when you add this stress on the system, like if people are sort of looking for new stressors or looking for new scenarios, it's actually it's actually the same thing. Is that the system is going to sort of respond. It may look a little different, but we've got sort of a coast of characters, a cast of characters that kind of, often it's the same pattern. It's just a different. There's a different coloring to it, so
Yeah,
it's a little
yeah,
bit it can be a little bit comforting to people to know, like, wait a minute, we just added stress on this, but these are my same group of parts that I've gotten to know all along. There's an extra level of fear, and I've been wanting to teach a little bit more around people identifying their core fear, because because you kind of you see the protectors, but you don't often see what's underneath it. So if you kind of see what's underneath it and relax the fear, then it's actually the protectors. If you just sort of like chase the protectors around, it's a bit like whack-a-mole trying to get your protectors to relax. But if you can relax the core fear underneath it, then the protectors naturally don't have to do that. So if we're chasing our firefighter, chasing our manager to try to figure out why is it wanting to do this behavior so much, or why is it so preoccupied,
yeah,
if we don't sort of relax the fear underneath it, then we're just kind of trying to chase the protectors around, and we spend a lot of time doing that,
yeah.
but we're not really getting to the core fear underneath it. So I've seen like clients that, it's whatever the core fear is, this this thing that we're going through, escalates it, and then everybody has their own different flavor to how they're responding to it based on the constellation of their system.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, what I'm noticing is it's almost like not relaxing, that's not the right word, but it's almost comforting in some way to be like, "Oh, these are the same cast of characters. This
Yeah.
isn't new. I'm not having a new response to something new." I don't yeah.
Yeah, this isn't newly traumatic.
Yeah.
It's a stressor, and it can be, like you see people that the same sort of helpers that are overworking to help other people. They already have that dynamic, and they've already probably had to work with this dynamic. Now it's just amped up even more,
Right.
So you've
Right.
got, so it's the same. So that's my idea, is that it can be relaxing to know, like, well, these are the same players.
Yeah, the same players, the same cast of characters. I like that. I like that. Someone said that it's like our nation's blood pressure is all up. Like
Hmm.
it's right. So it's like we're feeling it all as like this collective blood pressure. So it makes sense that's the stressor.
Yeah, and your core fear has to do with your response to that. And so I've got some ideas about different types of core fears, and I don't think this is they don't talk a lot about this in level 1 or level 2, is really about, about what's your core fear. Mitzi Rose talks about it when she did mapping around, if we can sort of identify the core fear, then we have the greatest potential for the whole system to relax. If you can identify the one that's, kind of where's the splinter in your hand, not like,
Mm.
so we're looking at all the place where the soreness is, but the core fear is the one that's escalating that, that tension inside. Um, so I thought we might talk a little bit about different types of core fears, and
Yeah, let's do
okay.
it. Do you
Okay.
think that before you say that, before you teach us about core fears, do you think that one exile has that core fear, or is it a shared fear?
It can be can be a core exile. It can be also like it can be temperament. It can be a core fear. It can be a core trauma. It can be also sort of our temperament, and
Okay.
how we just how we just approach the world. Uh,
So the good thing about that is, again, to relax into it, it's not something new. Like it's something that,
No. Yeah, in the same question, what are you afraid will happen? What are you afraid of? That same question you're asking your protectors, that question helps you. If you follow that question, what are you so afraid of? It kind of helps you, boil down or decipher down to getting to the core fear. So we're not doing anything different. We're still asking the same IFS questions, but we've got our, our parts detector turned on a little bit to
mm,
what am I most afraid of? We're starting to sort of get more attuned to that. If we're asking the
right.
same IFS questions, we're not using a different model to try to, get to the core fears.
Yeah. Okay. And so for people that don't know that second most important question in IFS,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
the second most? Yeah.
What are you
Go
so
ahead.
afraid of? What are you afraid will happen? Right.
Yeah.
That really is a core question is, what's the protector so afraid of? What's it afraid what happened if it doesn't, if it doesn't do this, or what's it afraid what happened if it's not active in this way? And we keep sort of asking, like, what's it afraid of? What's the fear? Then we can begin to hear with our parts detector, getting curious, like what are we most afraid of? And I think people have multiple fears, but usually there's kind of one that we're sort of we're most worried about, most afraid of.
Can we walk through some of these common fears?
Yeah. So like one of the ways of recognizing it a bit is like I discovered mine a bit. I was watching it's a Will Smith, this Pursuit of Happiness, that movie. I think it was Will Smith in Pursuit of Happiness. Do you know that movie?
Okay, I'm sorry. I just have to say this, that when you said Will Smith, I thought of the movie where he's with Kevin James and he teaches Kevin James to dance. And immediately I thought you're most afraid of dancing in front of other people.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm okay with that.
Are
Mine's
you?
worse than that. Yeah.
Okay, that was the Will Smith movie that popped in my head immediately. I don't know why,
Okay.
but okay.
Well,
Pursuit of Happiness,
well,
yes.
if it's Men in Black, I'd
Awful.
be afraid of like aliens. So it wasn't.
True,
It depends on
true.
which movie you go to.
Or
But it,
Aladdin, because he was just the genie in Aladdin, so
that could
he's
be that
afraid
could
of
be
being.
singing in public.
I was thinking more of the genie being stuck in the bottle.
Oh, there we go.
Hmm.
Being trapped. That would be a core fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can just use the Will Smith movie to sort this out with.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, the Pursuit of Happiness, the one that got me, like I couldn't breathe, is like the one where he's got this little kid, his child, and he's sleeping in the bathroom,
Yeah,
when
he's
he's
homeless, right?
he's homeless.
He's
Yeah.
homeless, yeah.
Yeah. So that like that one, like, sort of knocked me off my feet. I'm like, oh my God, there it is. Sort of mine is sort of about around not being able to provide. So that's one of my core fears. So sometimes like the core fears, like sometimes we get it by inquiry around what's the part afraid of, what's the most part, what's the most part. Sometimes we get it by, we sort of recognize it somehow, and
Mm,
or it kind of shows up, a pattern. It shows up over and over and over, like if
mm,
someone has if they're worried about, someone breaking into their house, so that would be a core fear of, safety, or
mm,
if the fear is that they're bad, if they're not doing everything they possibly can do. This may be one of these times coming up around, during this time. If I'm not doing everything I can do to kind of help other people, then
mm,
that means I'm bad and I'm sort of evil or corrupt somehow.
mm.
um, so that could be one of the core fears.
Well, my guess is it's like you said, like we're watching The Pursuit of Happiness. What I remember about that movie is my first thought is I'm never watching that again. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But my guess is we know it's a core fear. Well, it's a core fear if we've got that, if it lights us up in some way, or if it triggers some really strong reaction that you're like, wow, I'm having this really intense reaction to this movie. There might be something there.
Yeah, so that's one. So paying attention to kind of what lights us up, and we have parts that work really hard to keep us away from that. So that's one. I think one of the reasons we want to talk about it a little bit is our parts are working so hard to keep us away from it. But the thing around fear is that once we face it, it's not as bad. It's like, it's like, as a kid, I went to the doctor. Anytime I went to this doctor as a kid, we got this shot of penicillin, and back in my day, those needles were big and they hurt. So the anticipation of that, you could just say the doctor's name and I would be getting sweaty, because it was, so the anticipation of the fear is often worse. If we can sort of turn and face it, and look at it, like, what are you so afraid of, and face the fear, then we can sort of do something about it. It's the anxiety is actually the fear not being differentiated. So when it's not identified, then it turns into this generalized buzz, that we don't know what. Once we identify it, like, oh, this is what you're afraid of, this is a fear, then we can start to do something about it. We can address it more directly.
Right, because it's not just I'm afraid of someone breaking into my house. Like, right, that is scary, yes. But then if you say, okay, well, what is what would happen then, or what would happen then? And then that's going to be, it's not going to be just that. It's going to be something more, I don't know, what would you say? It's something more, I want to say potent. I don't know if that's the right word though.
There's something potent about it. There's something sort of specific about it. So we were talking earlier about, where does it come from? Like, could come from traumatic events. We don't want to throw people into those, sort of traumatic memories, in just our podcast here. But looking at how is a part designed around preventing that, and
Mm,
how is it designed around making sure that never happens again. So our protectors say, never again do they want certain things to happen, or never again do I want to feel, a certain way.
mm, yeah. So then my guess is with this COVID-19 situation, those protectors, I don't know. I almost feel like my protectors are like running for the hills or something. Like they're,
Yeah,
I don't know.
you don't find them to be extra active.
Well, I do find them to be extra active, but okay. Well, I feel both. I feel like they're extra active, but my exiles are like right there close to them. Like I'm feeling more exile energy than I think I've ever felt.
Yeah, so the vulnerability feels pretty high,
Yeah.
and that would create what kind of experience for your protectors if the vulnerability is high?
Well, what I'm noticing is a lot of protectors in flight. Like I'm noticing someone said this the other day about flight and I thought, yeah, I'm all my flight protectors are up. So whether it's I'm going to be present but I'm not really even going to be here right now, or I'm going to be eating all the food, or I'm going to this a lot of like flight. And even as you said that, I thought my protectors are like I'm out, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out.
Hmm. Yeah, and is that a pattern under stress? Is that?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I noticed on my work hard parts, like, even like working hard on this. I worked for a couple of days on just this podcast. It's like, that's my protector. If I can work hard, then I have some control over things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's a little bit more heightened,
Yeah.
during this time.
Well, and I wonder if your work hard is connected to providing.
It is. It's connected to providing. It's also, connected to, like, one of my fears is being useless, not being of service, or not being of, value. So it hits on that fear a little bit hard. If I can be of value, then my worth is higher.
Yeah, right. Isn't it interesting how they all play out, right? It's
Yeah,
interesting.
and it helps me to notice, like, so why am I working so much? Like,
Mm,
a lot of people are taking this time off and having a little bit of a break. Some people are working really, really hard, taking care of folks, and
yeah.
but since all I have to do is stay home to contribute, why is that so difficult?
Yeah. Yeah, that is such a good question. Well, and then we could ask that protector that's working so hard, what are you afraid would happen if I didn't work so hard?
Right.
And then get to some fear around that.
Yeah, and then it can start relaxing. I think the point I wanted folks to have is the parts are it's hard for our protectors to relax, if somehow we don't get to the fear underneath it. Like
Yeah.
just telling my protector, don't work so hard, or you don't have to work so hard, or we have enough money in the bank, that doesn't quite do it.
Yeah.
There's some type of unsettledness, some type of unsettled feeling in there.
Right. Well, if I have a splinter in my hand or my finger and I'm like, well, that splinter will come out by itself in a week. Like I could logically know that that splinter is going to, my cells are going to push it out or whatever. But man,
Yeah.
that sucker hurts still.
Right. Yeah. 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 Then you have to get your spouse to try to dig it out, and that hurts even
Oh,
worse.
yeah. Yeah.
We just did that last night when my wife had a splinter.
No way.
Yeah.
Were you gentle when you dug it out?
As gentle as I could be, right? She says no, but yeah.
You still had to get in there and dig.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what's hard about these core fears is that we have to dig a little bit. We have to sit down and focus.
Yeah.
But and anxiety is really to push us away from it, to move away from it. So we're constantly trying to get away from it, which leaves that part of us that is afraid, often alone and abandoned. And that's often
Mm.
what happened anyway. So trauma not only is what happened to us, but it's the experience of being alone, and not
Mm.
having the resources and the care we needed at the time. So it actually sort of perpetuates the same event when we try to move away from the fear. It leaves it
Mm.
alone, and then if it's alone, then it's going to keep perpetuating that same buzz or that same body sensation, or
Mm.
it's just going to keep perpetuating that.
Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm like, it's amazing we get out of that cycle ever. Right, like
Yeah,
those protectors are so smart and working so hard. It's amazing that we ever get out of that cycle, that we're ever even able to stop and say, "Okay, protector, I see you. I see you're working so hard for me. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this?" That we're ever able to pause and ask that.
yeah. I think it's quite miraculous that we can pause and ask that, and it's hard to do that by yourself. So
Mm,
not saying people should do this by themselves, but if I sort of when I sort of come in to work a little bit, I might sit at my desk and sort of check in a little bit. And if I have the anxiety going, like, okay, what are you afraid of? What are you worried about? And
yeah,
it may be, I'm not prepared, or I'm not organized, or is there can I feed the kids? Do I have enough in the bank account? So but that question, like, what's the anxiety? What's the fear underneath the anxiety? um and if we can kind of get to that, and address it. I may address it directly. I may be, okay, well, let's just look at our bank account. Let's look at our credit cards, look at our bank account. Let's look at what income we got coming in. Like, okay, we're good, or yeah,
yeah,
let's add it. We'll try to add a couple folks here and there and make sure that we're good, So the part may need direct, like, interaction with it before it relaxes. It may need to see proof of it,
mm,
not just sort of a false promise. It may be that
yeah,
we need to get up and check the locks of the door, and just to really settle that part. Like, okay, so yeah, all the doors are locked, and okay, we can relax now. So it may need something direct from us. It's not just often just telling it, you'll be all right, you know,
right,
or hearing
right.
it.
I like that. So then let's say you do that. You sit at your desk and you're like really feeling that anxiety. And then you're like, okay, I check my bank account. All right, and that settles it. And then you're still there. And so you need to go a little bit further.
Yeah. So what else are you afraid of? And we get into
Okay,
this.
so all right, good. So then you would say what else you're afraid of.
Yeah. What else are you worried about? What else you're afraid of?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then if we can listen to it a little bit, we differentiating or determining, is this something I can do something about or something I can't do something about. The whole serenity prayer, is a good approach to it. If I can't do something about it, then how do I let it go? But
Mm.
determining if it is something I can do something about, that I need to write an email. I might not send it or not, but I might want to write it, or, do I organize my calendar a little bit more, or do I clean my desk? Is there something I can do something about? If I can determine if it's not something I can do something about, that something I don't have control over, that's a really next good step. I think with the COVID stuff, knowing there are certain things we just don't have control over, and knowing kind of what that is, and to kind of help our system, identify, that when it's safe to go back out and let them. We don't quite maybe know that yet, but I don't have a lot of control over that
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
But be able to differentiate between, what do I have control over and what I don't have control over.
Yeah.
But hearing specifically from the part, what that is, what can I do something about?
Yeah.
I like to think, like, a lot of times what we do is we leave that anxiety running in the background and don't address it. And I think of that a lot. If your faucet was dripping in your bathroom, like that drip would accumulate to gallons and gallons of water, and we don't leave faucets dripping because we know it will accumulate. So a lot of times we leave this anxiety running in the background, thinking that it's really not taking up that much energy. But it is. It's taking up actually gallons of energy. And a lot of times we've learned to kind of live with a drippy faucets, or a window that leaks heat out. You're up in Maine. You can't have leaky windows. Up here, it's gonna.
Drafty windows.
Yeah, you're gonna spend a lot of money on that. But anxiety is a lot like drafty windows. It wastes a lot of energy.
Yeah. Right. So, and it doesn't make sense then that parts of us would be like, I don't want to go connect to that anxiety. Like that feels uncomfortable. It's already pulling so much anxiety. So then protectors work really hard to keep you away from it.
Yeah, and that's another form of energy. So not only do
Right. Okay. Yeah.
we have this leaky, faucet. The last time we talked about cabinets in your house. Now we're talking about
Yeah. Right.
leaky windows. Not only do you have a leaky window, you've also got a 30-year-old, furnace that's like working like crazy to heat the house. So now your energy bill is it's pretty high.
Now you're not going to be able to provide it all.
Yeah. So I think if we can assess, if we can sort of turn with the question, like, what am I afraid of? What's the fear? Remember, fear is not, it's not that bad once we face it. It's getting ourselves to face it. Often it's not that bad.
The other thing that I think I'm hearing what people say is that, like, okay, well, I'm afraid of, like, we're all afraid. We're all afraid of getting sick and dying. And I'm like, well, that's not really. I don't know that that's what we're all afraid of. Like, it's not. Yes, that's there, but that's like what you're saying is that's not actually our fear. Can I
Yeah, it
say that?
could,
I feel bad for saying that, but I don't know that that's why I'm running so anxious. I don't know that that's why I'm eating all of those amazing Cadbury chocolate eggs, that I'm afraid of getting sick and dying. I don't think that's what it is.
yeah, it's just something it could be that. I mean, if that's sort of one of your core fears, if that's something you really are afraid of, then that could be heightened. This, I would say, the stress in general more escalates whatever the core fear is in any way, because all of a sudden there's a lot less control that we have in the world. We feel a lot less control, because
Right.
there's a lot of things we're having to give up control over, and we also have to give up a lot of things that we've done to kind of keep us away from that.
Right. Right. And that's okay. Say more about that, because I think that's what you're saying too about the protectors. Like the protectors work really hard to keep us away from, like, I'm like, I wouldn't even watch The Pursuit of Happiness. Like I did watch it, but I would never, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to think about it. Like parts of me are like, nope, we don't even get close to those things that would
Yeah.
be, make me feel sad.
Well, I mean, for me, I notice how much how much of my life was sort of designed to kind of to not feel feelings. So
Mm,
I could escape by going to play tennis. I could escape by going kayaking, hiking. I just
mm,
go to TJ Maxx, and if
Oh, really?
I can always use some more socks, sweatpants, so,
Or purses. You go to TJ Maxx to buy designer purses.
oh yeah, that's the place, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this, if I felt too
What are you
uncertain,
talking about?
right? So now that we can't do all those things, then all of a sudden we feel the anxiety more, and
Mm.
may not know what it is, um, and and
Or we might say, I'm feeling anxious because we're all going to get sick and die, and not realizing that, like, actually, I'm anxious because I haven't been able to go to TJ Maxx and browse. Like,
yeah, and something's coming up. I think the one thing that people fear the most is the fear of the unknown, uncertainty, and it makes sense. It's hard to sort of be certain about uncertainty. It's hard to put on that, like,
right?
the very nature of it, of uncertainty. But uncertainty drives, we'll be in pain rather than be uncertain. We would rather be uncomfortable than being uncertain.
Yeah.
So just living with uncertainty itself, creates a good bit of anxiety. Um,
Mm.
and so we have certain parts that come up with, sort of these stories about ourselves when we feel uncertain. It means I'm not lovable enough, or I'm not going to be valuable, or I'm not going to have a sense of direction, or I'm out of control, or these different fears that come up.
That's great. Okay. So the uncertainty, let me just make sure I'm getting this right. The uncertainty will then trigger those core fears or whatever that core fear is.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Or it sort of cascades into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because people will say, right, like, I just don't like feeling out of control. But that's not really a fear of not having control, maybe. But I don't think that doesn't sound like the most potent fear. There seems like there's maybe something after that.
Yeah, I think of the fear of being out of control is sort of more the fear of being overwhelmed.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
and so if we've had that experience of being overwhelmed, then our protectors say, never again do I want to be overwhelmed. So I'm going to be in control of things. So I won't be overwhelmed again.
Yeah.
So it could be that comes up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes if you go through, like, there's a list of feeling words, and if you sort of go through the list of feeling words, a lot of times you can kind of hit on it, like the fear of being abandoned, or the fear of being rejected, or the
Mm.
fear of being criticized, or fear of feeling worthless, or the fear of not being lovable, or the fear of being bad, or the fear of causing harm. And then we check in with our protectors. Is that what you're afraid of? You're afraid of being rejected.
Yeah. I love that idea. It's almost like going to it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, you get underneath it a little bit. Like you can't get the splinter out until you find it.
Mm.
You gotta find you gotta find the splinter. You can't just sort of, maybe you can soak your hand in peroxide, it'll come out. But
I feel like one time I had a splinter, my grandmother, who was, like, from Baltimore City, I think she maybe did something with whiskey right? Like, something with, I don't know, maybe she gave me a shot of whiskey. No, I was
yeah,
little.
and it
But
didn't hurt.
something happened. There was some sort of natural concoction that happened.
Yeah, you're hoping that gets to it, but the direct route's a little bit more predictable.
Yeah. Well, there are times when, like, right, if you're hiking or kayaking, there are times that you actually have to ignore, like, or the parts tell you have to ignore. I don't know that you actually do, but
Well, I think that if we do get obsessed with it, then we have a part that's obsessing about it. And that's the illusion that
mm,
if I just worry about it enough, or if I stay hypervigilant enough, then I'm going to have some control over it.
yeah.
If I just worry about, if I watch the news enough, that somehow the political figures will do the right thing if I just watch them closely enough.
That makes sense.
If we only have that kind of power,
Right.
but we don't, and that's this thing around what do we have control over, what we don't have control over.
Well, that might help people.
Watching the news more is not going to make people act right.
There is something about people that need to watch the news all the time, right? And then you just get stuck in watching it. But it does, I think it does give you a sense of control or a
Yeah.
sense of knowing or being certain, right? All those things kind of line up with watching the news, I think.
Well, I remember 9/11. I watched the news a lot, and I back then I had compassion and commiserating confused. That I thought if I commiserated enough with everyone that was in pain, then I would
Yeah.
be compassionate, a compassionate person. And so that's not the same thing.
Did
And
that help you be compassionate?
no, it just sort of burned me out. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
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 So having clarity around like the fear of not being a compassionate person, the fear of being a bad person, and then I'm not if I'm not like if I'm not in pain or if I'm not suffering the way other people are, then
Right.
I'm a bad person. Um,
Yeah.
and confusing commiserating with compassion is for me is a major kind of source of that. I get those. I used to get those confused a lot more.
Yeah. I could see that that same issue could come up for people right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think the having a lot of gratitude and appreciation for people on the front lines, and somehow I need to be suffering the same as they are, you
Yeah.
and somehow that's going to make their life easier. Um,
Yeah.
but that's not compassion. That's commiserating.
Right. And the fear, so what would the fear be around that?
I think the fear of being bad,
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
the fear of being
Yeah.
bad, albeit
Yeah.
that I'm narcissist or privileged or ungrateful.
Right.
I think the piece is if that's the thing we notice a whole lot, if we notice that a whole lot, I think the question is, what can we really do to contribute? And a lot of therapists are offering sessions for people or making masks or they're trying to find some way of contributing, to those folks. So commiserating is a false form of contributing. It's
Mm.
not a true form of contributing.
Mm.
It really doesn't make a contribution. It gives us the illusion of contribution, but it doesn't
Right.
make a true contribution. So, so
Right.
asking like, so if that's the thing you notice, asking the question like, so what would make a true contribution to their making their lives easier?
Do you have like a list of the core fears?
The list I have is the fear of being bad, um, fear of being unloved, fear of being worthless, so fear of being without identity,
Hmm.
fear of being useless, helpless, or incompetent, fear of being without support or direction, kind of fear of being aimless, fear of being deprived or in pain, fear of being controlled or harmed by others, and the fear of being kind of confused and discombobulated or lost. So those are when I so those are kind of sort of the core fears I'll sort of reflect back on as I'm listening to folks and seeing if I can kind of hear it in their story or
And even hear it in the avoidance, right? It sounds like there's
yeah. Sometimes you can hear it in avoidance. Yeah, the best. I mean, the process in IFS is still the best is one of inquiry, where we go inside and we ask, what's so scary? What are you so afraid of right
yeah.
now? What's the threat?
And then so then when you have the fear, it's funny because I was thinking about how the fear, like the fear of being unworthy can often, like sometimes the fears can, um, like thinking of one fear could actually get to a more vulnerable fear, a more fragile fear, like the fear of being unworthy
Yeah,
actually, I think lines up with being loved or being enough or,
yeah. Or we get a little cocktail of them.
yeah, God, yeah, yeah. So once you have that that fear, like once you've identified, yeah, there's this fear, this core fear in me, and then would you just do IFS, like just going to that fear and loving
Yeah,
on it a little bit,
yeah. If we can befriend it, and listen to it,
i.e. loving on it?
right? the Yeah, if we can love on it a bit and find out. I mean, what we want to find out often is with exiles, these young vulnerable parts, is actually they're afraid of something that's happened in the past, and something in the present is escalating that,
Right.
is triggering that. So one and the big piece we notice is the part feels alone. It doesn't feel like anyone's there for it, and that's a big piece of that trauma, is that it didn't have anyone like the adult us around at the time, to help it with those feelings it's having. So yeah, there's not a shortcut to. We got to get directly to it. We
Yeah.
can't just sort of walk in the rain and hope we get a good bath. It doesn't quite work that way. I don't know how that
um
metaphor works, but
yeah, it is kind of fun to play in the rain though.
it is. Maybe if you take the soap in a big downpour, it could
Yeah,
work.
you could dump like dish soap all over you or something.
We can make it work.
I think so too. So the thing that I was just thinking before, a part of me wanted to say something sarcastic, was that it's the same idea though about if we befriend the part just by loving on that part, that feels so good. There's so much exhaling that happens, just like when we go to the anxiety or we like look at the thing that we're avoiding, that actually there's so much relief that happens when we're not just avoiding the fear or avoiding the thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that if we can identify and name it, it relaxes it a lot, because that the unknown, like the uncertainty in the unknown, really keeps it buzzing. So
Yeah.
it's like with your kids. If you can name the feeling, a lot of times they calm down. You're
Mm,
feeling unheard, you're feeling uncared about, or you're feeling mistreated, or you're it's feeling unfair to you. If you can sort of name it, our kids, they'll calm down when they're upset.
yeah, well, I feel like that happens to me.
Right.
That happens to me because then I feel seen and I feel validated, and it also says, "Oh, it's okay that I feel like there's sort of then this like, "Oh, it's okay that I'm feeling this," or, um, it just feels so good, and maybe it's also that I'm not feeling so alone in it. Whatever I'm feeling, I'm not feeling so alone.
Yeah, I think that's a hallmark of attachment, is to feel seen, heard, and valued. And when we do that internally, then those lost exiled parts of us don't feel, out there on their own, like they're facing
Yeah.
the big world by themselves. So I think that's an important process, and part of the IFS process is to do that.
Yeah.
For me, if I check in with my regular cast of characters, like if I just sort of start with, okay, so what's my usual pattern?
Yeah.
What do I usually do? I withdraw, I isolate, I overwhelm, and I work hard. So how are those guys doing? Right
Yeah.
now. And so if you're going to start with your usual cast of characters that are their major players, and just check in and see how those parts are doing. And if there is something that's feeling vulnerable underneath, check in, what's your relationship to those parts? Have we decided they're causing us too much trouble, and that we want to
Mm.
get rid of them, or we want to ignore them? That's gonna escalate them. So
Mm.
how are you feeling towards your usual vulnerabilities? And then you can see if there's something else. I think right now the pull is to look for the extra, rather than looking at, okay, so how's everybody else in our system, how are they dealing with this? Let's take care of those folks first, and then see if there's something extra. you know.
I That is such a good word there, Chris, is that like, right, there is a pull to look for the extra instead of being like, what is my normal way of handling stress? And let me look at that. Like, let me look at that.
Yeah, well, I
That's
think
great.
I think this is because this is new and we haven't really faced the pandemic. most of us in our lifetime, then the pull is to look for the extra,
Yeah.
and so I'm imagining if I get the virus, it's going to be like 3 or 4 weeks of misery, and I mean, it could be worse, but that's generally not my fear. I can, I've been sick for, 3 or 4 weeks before, and it was horrible, but that's not usually not what I'm so afraid of.
Yeah, agree. Okay, I have one more question for you, but it's funny. So I want to make
Okay.
sure we cover everything before I
Yeah.
ask you a funny
I think
question.
that's what I wanted to just sort of get out there a little bit is let's take care of our general, um, group of parts and then see if there's extra.
I think that sounds good.
I hope it's helpful to folks if we can calm down these parts first, and then we can
Yeah.
see if there's more. What's your
Okay.
finding?
All right, here's my funny. What's your favorite Will Smith movie? And did you watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah?
yeah. I love the Fresh Prince.
Did you ever dress like him?
Oh no, I couldn't pull that off.
No.
No, or dance like him either.
Oh no. No, yeah. Most of us can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But favorite Will Smith
My
movie?
favorite Will Smith. I like the Men in Black movies. I liked Aladdin. I thought he was great in Aladdin.
He was great in Aladdin. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed him in Aladdin, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he almost stole the show. I mean, I think I was way more interested in him than I was Aladdin.
Well, that's what you get with Will Smith, I think.
That's true.
Oh, he's
Favorite Will
funny in the Bad Boys movies. He's funny there too.
I don't think I've seen those
Yeah, those are
because
good.
a new one just came out.
Yeah,
What
he's
if
good in that one. He's funny.
That's a good one. What
Yeah,
about the song Summertime? Have you
yeah.
heard that song? It's from the probably 90s.
I'll pull it up on my Spotify.
Please do.
All right.
And then have dance party.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, Chris, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Sammy.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.
Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside.